Hello, Bernd.
Hi, how are you doing?
Good to see you. How have you
Good
been?
to see you.
How's the summer been where you are?
Here is actually winter.
Ah, well,
I'm
hopefully.
in, I'm in Brazil.
Oh, you're in Brazil. Oh,
Yeah.
well, Brazil winter is not so bad.
No, no, no. You can easily survive.
Well, that's nice. I wish I was down there with you.
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure if I come to Orlando now with all this vaccination and test
Well,
things. No?
I think it will be very difficult to come in at this point. So maybe
Yeah,
another
yeah,
time.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, next time. No?
Yeah, I think it's going to be. I think it'll be difficult for people to come from other countries to be in this time just to get into the country.
I know the rules here.
But I'm planning to drive down actually. I'm not going to fly down because it's just much easier with the way the airlines are these days and with delays and scheduling and canceled flights and things like that. So
I know. Yeah.
I think it's just easier if I drive. I'll take 2 days and it'll be interesting to see the country.
New experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. That's it.
Okay. Hello, Richard. How are you? I know you're not in Brazil. You're in Canada.
Great. Yeah. What's happening in Brazil?
Well, Brazil is beautiful as always, I'm sure. Ask Bernd. I mean,
Nice.
but unfortunately, just like Canada, it's not some place I think we can go at the moment. I think
Yeah.
crossing the border is not very likely to go to Canada.
Mm.
Hello,
Are you doing trainings with Bandler, Mr. Bandler? Dr.
yes,
Bandler?
yeah, I'll be going down in a little bit and driving down.
Are you seeing Canadians come down or not? Because of the
I don't know if Canadians can come in. I think some Canadians can come in, but Americans can't go to Canada. I think that's kind of they've blocked the border.
Is that recent? Is that just now? Because it keeps changing all the time.
I think it's just been ongoing. So you could thank Mr. Trudeau for that.
I think the vaccinated Americans can go August 9th. They can go August 9th.
Yeah, but it's the other way. I think it's still an issue.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Yeah, there was just an article about a lot of places. So anyway, we can get started for now, and other people may join us. They usually trickle in and out as time goes on. But today we're going to be talking about conversational hypnosis and specifically about application. But any questions on any of the previous ones? Bernd, you and I know each other, but I don't know if you've seen any of the previous videos.
I think I trained with Matthew. I think maybe we did the trainer training together, no? And
Yes.
I've seen your previous videos all. I'm well prepared.
Oh, okay. Any questions on anything before we get started, or is there anything that you would like to cover?
Well, the intention part, no? I think this is a very critical or deciding, decisive one.
Yeah.
I'm looking very much for sales situation. Yeah? So I'm not sure what the intention part is. Is it like I have the best product, or is it like several steps? I'm a person to trust, or
Okay, yeah, we'll definitely be covering that because that's a very foundational part of conversational hypnosis and the use of the skills, especially in the sales world. Richard, I know you're in that world as well. Matt, I know you may not know you're in that world, but you're in that world.
I'm in that world. Oh yeah, for sure. Everything is selling, man.
Right, exactly. You went back to the book, I see. So anyway, to get started, we talked a little bit about the role of intention. Oh, we have somebody new joining us today. Well, that would be nice. And Marcus is connecting to audio. Hello, Marcus. How are you? Still connecting to audio. Marcus, are you there? I feel like I'm on the radio.
Yes. Yes, I am.
Well, welcome.
Thank you.
Well, thanks for coming
Are you-
today. And I have a question for you. Have you
Certainly.
seen the previous videos? And if not,
No,
okay.
I have
Okay.
not seen any previous videos.
Okay, well, you can see them on Facebook or on YouTube. They're all there.
And you are James Cito?
I am, yes. And
Okay.
The one and only.
I wanted to ask if you had any questions or any areas you'd like to cover, because we want to make sure we're covering things that people want to know.
Well, I'm certified in hypnosis through Omni Hypnosis in Florida.
Okay.
And
Very
I also am
good.
certified in NLP, Reiki, Silver Mind Control. So I'm interested in NLP applications as they relate to hypnosis.
Okay, excellent. We'll be doing that. So did you study with Jerry Kine previously?
Pardon me? Yes, I did.
Okay.
Yes, I did. One of Jerry's kids.
Yeah, I did as well. And you know, he's obviously was a legend. For those of you who didn't know, Jerry Kine is, you know, a legend in the hypnosis world as a teacher. I never saw his stage shows, but you know, obviously he'd been around for many years. Was highly influential with many great hypnotists and hypnosis teachers. You know, his passing on was very sad. But hey, he survived something like 5 heart attacks. So, you know, hypnosis must have done something good for him. And excellent. So we'll get started. So
Yep, I'm getting a lot of good stuff.
Yeah. So the first thing is we're going to cover intention, because that's kind of foundational to the use of all these skills and how it translates, you know, the NLP skills and the hypnosis skills come together. Because ultimately, it's, if you don't start with intention, you tend to wander off, you know, into, you know, your message just kind of goes into whatever's the easiest place to be. Now, when you have the right intention, your message can move and can flex and can wander, which is a little bit where the role of what's called nested loops in NLP comes in. But in order for them to actually make sense and to come back around, as we know when we do nested loops, you know, we start a story and then we move into another story, we move into another story, eventually we come back and we close all of those loops. If you don't have the proper mindset and intention, then it's just being lost in kind of this free flow of, you know, of thinking. You know, it's almost like, you know, word salad that doesn't make any sense. But when you set your intention to where you want to take the person and the type of experience you want the other person to have, that is where you start to bring together the different pieces of each of these stories and how they relate to what the person wants to know. So that's the other reason why it's important to get the criteria and values of the person to understand where they want to go. If you're talking about it, say in a sales type of situation, you have to understand, what does that person want and how do they want the information given to them, which is exactly the same as in a therapeutic situation or a hypnosis situation. It's one of the areas where the use of the meta model is so important in asking the right questions. Because if you don't ask the right questions, you don't know what the person wants, and you don't know where to take them, then it becomes your agenda as opposed to the other person's agenda, and not addressing that. So in a sales situation, the role of intention is really about keeping you on track and trusting your unconscious to follow that in order to bring that person through the experience you want them to have. And ultimately, if what you're selling matches what they want, then they'll be much more willing to buy it. It's enticing them to buy it. It's inviting them to buy it. In the hypnosis situation, it's really giving them the same type of experience they would have in hypnosis, but knowing where to take them as opposed to guessing. So say, for example, and this example is applicable to both situations. If somebody wants to buy a car, or if somebody wants to lose weight, right? So I mean, you would think, well, they're not quite the same, but it's two people who want something, and they want something a certain way, right? So we all know there's more than dozens of different types of cars and models and all that, different type of fuels, different, and definitely different prices, because obviously I am not in the ultra high ones. I would never buy a car that expensive to begin with, because I grew up in New York City. I grew up in Manhattan. Everybody knows the roads in Manhattan are terrible. So if you have a sports car, you'll bottom out all the time and ruin it. And it's more likely to get hit and stolen and all that. So for us, unlike when I lived in California, where cars are status symbols and people live out of their cars, for me, a car is it's a utility product. It's like a toaster. You don't need to have a fancy one in order to have it toast. It's just a toaster. And it gets me from place to place. Obviously, you want one that's not going to be unsafe and all that, but those are kind of the basics. So it's important to understand what that person wants when they buy a car. Same thing with if a person wants to lose weight. As you know from studying with Jerry, Marcus, you have the hypnotic contract, right? That's where you can use the meta model to find out the information about what that person wants to know, what that person wants to experience, and how that person will know they have that experience. So do they, for example, do they want to really lose weight, or are they being told to lose weight, right? Which goes towards, in NLP, that's one of the conditions of well-formedness, right? Is it created and maintained by the individual, or is somebody pushing them to do it? Because if somebody's pushing them to do it and they don't really want to do it, you're kind of wasting your time at that point, right? At the same time, do they want to lose weight by, becoming anorexic, or do they want to lose weight by exercising more, eating better, feeling healthy, and getting that information and wrapping that into the conversation? And when you use conversational hypnosis, before you start taking them through the formal hypnotic process, if that's what they want to experience, and I don't know if you other guys are using formal hypnosis as well. Some clients expect that. They want to be put in the chair. They want to be told to open and close their eyes. They want to have experienced the catalepsy. And it makes your session easier when you're working with their expectations. But before you even take them through, you can start with the conversational piece by starting to directionalize their thoughts by just using your words and how you speak to them, and finding out where they are and where they want to go and how they want to actually have that experience. And so when you set your intention, there's a couple of levels of intention. So there's the overall things to say, I want to get the sale, or I want to get the person to change, right? That's the overall arc of the intention. But within your intention, you can't jump to that spot at the end, because there's too much in between. And basically, you're dealing with essentially going back to the old Newtonian physics, right? Objects at rest tend to stay at rest. Objects in motion tend to stay in motion. So you have to overcome inertia the inertia that the person's in, because if they're not in inertia, they actually would have changed already. Because there's some people that have no problem changing. They don't need to see a hypnotist to change. They don't need to even, they're very easy to quote unquote sell because they've done all their research and they know what they want. And they just say, Bernd, I want what you're selling. Yeah, I hear you're a good guy.
Right.
This is what I want. This is how much I want to pay. And if that's within your parameters, there's no selling involved. You just have to fulfill the need. But most people are overcoming an inertia towards it. I mean, I know what that feels like. I just bought an iPad Pro 12-inch. Obviously not something that's cheap, but since I'm, travel is starting up again, I'm trying to go down to as few devices as possible so I don't have to be a mule and lug stuff around when I'm traveling. And I was going back and forth, and I bought a refurbished one from Apple, which I always do because, it's you get a better buy and you get Apple Care, and if there's something wrong with it, they exchange it and all that type of stuff. And so I was thinking about doing it last week, and I, had it saved on my browser and all that. I got back to the, to where I was staying, went back, I said, okay, yeah, I'm going to order it. And they were out. It's like it was sold out. So, okay, did I miss out on it? Yeah, maybe that's a good thing. I'll just keep an eye on it. I went back today and they had that same one, and I just went and pulled the trigger. But that goes towards, I wasn't ready to do that. And so if your intention is to get to the end point of where you want to go and where the other person wants to go, there's still a lot of points in between in order to hit. And these are stages that a person sometimes needs to go through in order to accept and get, and this is where you get the difference between having somebody happy with the interaction and somebody who gets buyer's remorse. And buyer's remorse can happen, whether you're buying something or whether you're seeing a client and getting a treatment, because that person sometimes goes back to their familiar behavior. All right. And so if you get buy-in at the different steps of the process, that person gains momentum, getting back to the Newtonian physics and analogy, right? Objects in motion tend to stay in motion, right? This is why, the idea of people getting in shape is difficult, because they'll buy a gym membership, they'll go a couple of times, and then they'll go back to their old behavior. Whereas that one of the reasons why having a personal trainer works in that case is because they're making a commitment and they're paying for it. And so there's a pull to them to actually show up and go to the gym. It's not because having a personal trainer is necessarily better than working out on your own. It's just an extra motivator to that. And so it's about getting buy-in at each of the different steps and being able to test to see where that person is, right? And so in NLP, we have test, operate, test, exit. So you have to make sure you're hitting those pieces, that they don't have any questions that they can use to go back on the sales process or on the therapeutic process, that you're satisfying them and gaining momentum towards the goal that they want to have. Does that make sense?
Yes, very much so.
Right. So there's a tendency for all of us, because we know where we want to take the person, and we're seeing that we're getting good reactions, right? And like the person's really on board and all that. It's really understanding them, then what they want, right? Which way they're going, what they're going towards. Remember the old towards and away in NLP?
Right.
Okay. Well, unfortunately, a lot of people who learned NLP back in the 80s and stuff like that, they learned it through a book called Unlimited Power by Tony Robbins. And Tony does a lot of really good stuff. And that's actually a really good NLP book for the time. Unfortunately, he got that one piece wrong. So you get a whole generation of people who say, I'm a towards person, I'm an away person, or you're a towards person, you're an away person. When in fact, everybody is both towards and away, because if you're going towards something, you're going away from something. The problem that a lot of people have when they're thinking in those terms is that they know what they're going away from, they know what they're not happy with, but they don't know what they're going towards. And when they don't know what they're going towards, they tend to gravitate back towards what they're familiar with, which is what they're not happy with. But it's familiar. So the unfamiliar is seen as being dangerous by the unconscious mind, right? Which is normal. We don't know what we're getting into. It's, potentially it could be dangerous. That's where we get those feelings of anxiety about trying something new. Or sometimes people have a feeling of anticipation and excitement about that. Physically, what we experience is the same feeling. If you think about it, it's actually the same feeling. But the emotional attachment and the label we give it is either fear or anxiety, or excitement and anticipation. Sometimes it goes towards what's the context, right? Having a date with a new person, or having the opportunity to meet somebody we've always wanted to meet, or going down a dark alley, where you don't know who might be down there. And that's where we have to start taking control and understanding of what's going on in the brain by understanding what a person is also going away from, just they want. So a good way to ask that is, in a sales situation, okay, it's like, what's important for you about whatever it is that the person is interested in? And just say, okay, well, I just want to understand what have you been using before? And what were you not getting from it? Because that will tell you what they're going away from. And in
Right.
say for example, a therapeutic situation, or you're seeing a client for a change work, you say, well, what are you not getting with, what you're doing is obviously something you've been doing for a while. What is it not giving you? Right. And that is just as important as understanding what they want. Because this way, where they're moving away from, and that way you can help them gain something about what they're going towards. And in NLP, that's called the propulsion system. That's where you set up the propulsion system when you have both sides, because that's where you move the person through, and that can really be done with just speaking to them. And that's where that, even though it doesn't seem like conversational hypnosis doesn't come in where the person's just zonked out. It actually goes in towards directionalizing the person's thoughts right from the beginning of your interaction. Because when you're able to directionalize the thoughts, just like objects in motion tend to stay in motion, you can then direct that motion in different places, as opposed to having to stop and then overcome inertia to go somewhere else. Once you get movement, then you can start getting a lot of smooth transition towards where the person wants to go. But it's really important to be that person's agenda and understanding what that person is. That's one of the things I appreciated about Jerry, is that he would always say, well, it doesn't matter whether I even believe in what they want. That's for them. That's what that person wants. If a person wanted a reincarnation experience, it doesn't matter if I don't believe it or not. It's what that person experiences. So
Right.
that's where, it's, if a person wants to buy something and you don't think that's the right thing, you can advise them. But realistically, if they're set on buying that, then you can fulfill that and maybe give them something that will fulfill that need, but will be better for them as well. So the guy comes in, he wants to buy a sports car and all that. And you find out he's got he's got 2 kids and his wife and all that. And the kids are, they may fit in the tiny little back seat of the sports car, because they're 3. But by the time they're 6, they'll be kicking the seat. And by the time they're 8, they'll be climbing over the seat. And, it's not just about him having a sports car, because his wife would be really mad at him that he bought a sports car and she's still driving the minivan. And she's, it's eventually going to be really bad for him. But you can get him like the nice Mercedes, say, for example. It gives him all the sport features, but everybody will fit, right? And it'll probably be cheaper than the sports car. And that satisfies everything. But ultimately, it's about being able to give the person what they want, while at the same time making sure you're staying away from what they don't want. Because otherwise they'll loop back and they'll say, oh, well, I worked with so-and-so and it didn't work. And that,
Right.
or they'll get buyer's remorse. Oh, Bert sold me this thing that I don't, I didn't want. It's like, even though they wanted it, at the time they wanted it, but it's important for us because we're the ones who are communicating properly, to really find those things out. And for Richard, it's actually even worse, because Richard is the top real estate person up in the Toronto area. And so obviously cars are very expensive, and sometimes they get it to be as much as houses, but for the most part, houses are more expensive. So, if they're not happy with it, they'll tell everybody. So people will sometimes tell you when they're happy about, they'll tell other people when they're happy. They'll always tell everybody when they're not happy. And so for all of us, and Matt, you live, in a pretty small area. Everybody can, will know what you do. And, if they're not happy, that could be a very bad thing, because they'll tell people, that, oh, Matt didn't help me, that type of deal. It's not necessarily good, especially if you did help them at the time, but didn't cover them going back on their old behaviors.
Yeah.
And that's why that's the first piece, is to create the propulsion system, find out what they don't want, give them what they want, and then future pace them into where they're going to be. And this is the future pacing is one of the things that I think a lot of people forget. They think it's only in terms of making sure the person is locked down, as to, seeing themselves in it, and, in the car or the house they're buying or whatever it is, and using it and being happy. But it's also testing to see if that change will stick through new situations, or if they're going to be happy with it in different situations, or maybe situations they hadn't thought of bringing up. And that's again a test. That's testing your work. And
Can you give an example, please, of future pacing in a negative, not a negative, but in that way where you just mentioned?
Well, say for example, again, and I see this because I do watch HGTV. I like to watch the real estate shows and all that type of thing, because you never know what's going to happen. These people say, "Oh, this house is perfect for us." Well, this is going to be great, and they have little kids, right? And you see, the parents are like 6'5", right? So they're pretty big people. And I say, "Oh yeah, this is plenty of room for the kids." And like one of them saying, "I don't know about that." It's like, you got to understand, your children will grow up. Ideally, your children will grow up. In a couple of years, that kid is going to be 6'5" too. So you're going to have 4 people who are 6'5", not 2 people who are 6'5" and 2 people who are 2'3". Right? So I say, okay, so think about it this way: are you planning to stay in this home forever? Yes. Okay, so think about this from 10 years from now, when your kids are, your height. Is there still going to be enough room? Or, should I make an appointment in my calendar to call you again in 10 years? Does that make sense, Rich?
Beautiful. Thank you.
Right. Which may well be. I mean, they may be ready for a new house by then anyway. But, it's really strange to me that, people sometimes, which I kind of understand, because my mom still, obviously views me as her child, right? So, in her mind, I'm still a little kid, and and that's normal with all parents. But from the physical point of view, kids grow, right? Especially, they think, oh yeah, I have, it's even more. It's like I have two little kids and I have a puppy. It's like, well, what type of puppy do you have? Is it like a little pug? No, it's a Great Dane. It's like, so that's another big thing that's going to be in the house. So people don't often plan for that. They fall in love with something they're very in the moment. And when you future pace that, you can put them into a different scenario, an evolving one, to see if what you're providing for them is not only good for the present, getting them away from where they were, but also for the future. Because if you don't cover the future, that is where you can have some issues, as well. Because people will still say, well, I went to you for a session, or, I came to you for a service or a product, and, you didn't help me. It's like, yeah, but you came to me 5 years ago, and, were you unhappy through those 5 years? No, but I thought it would last longer. And, in the case of, a house, obviously, people want that to last longer. In the case of a change work, people really want their change to last until they want something else. And so that's why if it lasts a week, generally, not too hard. A month, sometimes they start falling back a little bit. A year, a lot of people go back to where they were, unless you actually are covering those bases and getting the buy-in at each step, and then testing it by putting them into different scenarios. And that's done in, you could do that either informal trance or not. And seeing what other resources maybe they would need to be able to pull out, or that you could give them, in order for them to not have those types of issues, or to have the confidence to move through those anything that can happen in the intervening times. And that's where that really is a change, as opposed to a patch. Does that make sense?
Excellent. Yes.
Okay, terrific. Bernd, did that kind of cover some of it?
Yes, of course. Very good that you went straight into this question. I noticed you elicited some emotions on. This is on purpose. I would use this like the iPad example to set up a propulsion system and give like 3 examples, something like that, or I stay rather on the subject in real estate.
Oh, well, okay. Well, it's easy to use different examples, and that's where, again, the intention comes in, because you can use almost any example and make it applicable to the situation the person's in. And that's why I'm covering 2 different types of applications at the same time, just by using those examples and bringing those in. Now, one of the keys to really doing this, and I cover this in my second book, Influential Rapport, has to do with sharing of yourself. Now, we all have boundaries that we set up around ourselves about how much we share in ourselves. And a lot of times those boundaries are very tight, but when you lower the boundaries, the other person gets to know you as much as you get to know them. And it's through those stories that you're able to share who you are and share an example from your experience that the other person can relate to. And when they're relating to you, you're bringing them through your experience that connects to their experience that they want to have, which helps directionalize their thoughts. And the more you're able to share of yourself, the more the other person feels that rapport with you because you're willing to share with yourself. And like any type of good hypnosis, you have to go first. If you don't go first, then the other person is still at a distance. When you go first, you pull the other person into your world. When they're in your world, you can directionalize their thoughts and really give them the experience that they want to have. That's why it's always good to, if you're doing, hypnosis sessions, give people good stuff, just give people bad stuff, you get it too. So, so it's always better to give people good stuff. I remember I did a session with a friend of mine just because I wanted to try a new way of doing things, and she wanted to lose weight, and I brought it back to it's all about making choices when you're eating, about not just what you eat but how much you eat, and paying attention to that. And I ended up losing some weight on it, which was great, because while I was giving her those suggestions, I was taking those suggestions myself. And that really, I think, helped out quite a bit. And that's the approach that I use with weight loss, because I've had some people who've wanted that, or smoking or some of the other ones. For me, instead of having like an aversion type of thing, I always say, you can have it, just be cognizant of how much you're having, so you can satisfy yourself and be happy with having a little bit, because that means you can have a little bit another time. And, that changes their experience of it, maximizes the experience while minimizing the amount they consume, and also giving them a better way to essentially control their behavior, which is ultimately what they wanted to do to begin with. And it's that sense of control that really, I think, a lot of people are looking for, especially people that I've found who are overeating or something like that. A lot of times they did it as a result of feeling that they couldn't control anything else. And this way it gives them a different viewpoint on control, controlling their own body, controlling, what they're eating or how much they're eating. And they really, I've seen, really kind of appreciated that approach and enjoyed that approach and have been successful with it.
James, I've got to leave you. I've got something come up with the family, but I'm very interested in what you're saying. You're right on time, and I will be back with you as I can.
And you'll be able to see this recording as well on Facebook or YouTube.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you for coming, Marcus.
Okay.
All right.
And you're still here.
Yeah.
So Bernd,
James, let me go one further question.
Yeah, of course.
Would you recommend me to prepare like some stories that show how someone set up a propulsion system, and within this story already prepare some embedded commands?
Well, I think in the beginning, it's good to have some stories you're comfortable sharing. Right. So as you get more comfortable doing these things, and this is an outgrowth of what we did in charisma and trainers training, is really at a certain point, it
becomes natural.
It becomes natural, and that becomes more comfortable with sharing those stories. Now, here's what I would suggest is that you pick a couple that you're comfortable sharing, right? Because again, it has to do with the boundary and the lowering of the boundary. So when you're ready to lower the boundary more by becoming comfortable with sharing certain stories, you'll be able to share more, right? And depending on the situation, obviously,
if it is a big group or is somebody already sometime, or how formal the business is.
It doesn't have to be, because sometimes your story can actually make a formal meeting much more informal, because that totally opens the people up. But I would say it's kind of important when you start to maybe pick a couple of stories that you're comfortable sharing. And, as far as putting in embedded commands and things like that, I would suggest that you practice speaking with embedded commands and questions all the time. And then they'll come out naturally in your stories. But I would start with the stories. And then here's the key to the teaching story. And in this case, I'm going to say all of these stories are teaching stories, right? They don't have to be the exact story. They could be pieces of different stories that you put together. Does that make sense?
In the meaning of like a chain, or in only.
Okay, so say for example this. So let's go back to the iPad story. I went back to the website, to the Apple website, and obviously I do recommend the refurbished, looking at the refurbished first, because they fix them up, they're really good, they're fine. You save a couple $100 a pop. If you don't have it need to have it brand new, that's okay, because my sister has a friend who's a very good friend of hers, who I found out, of all things, very artistic. He's a very nice guy. Excuse me, my niece, his friend, and she said, "Oh, well, he's a rug maker." Of all things, she said, "Oh, he made me a rug." It's like, well, that's interesting. I don't know anybody who's a rug maker. I didn't know that was actually a thing anymore, because, usually you use a machine, that you put the pattern into the computer and the machine makes it and all that. But no, he makes rugs. And, that's kind of an interesting thing, because I hope he can make a living making rugs. It seemed like a nice rug. And, he's a nice guy. So, good luck to him. But the interesting thing about it is, apparently he designs them on an iPad Pro. And that's all he uses, to be able to do that. And so I went back to the site, and, that wasn't the main thing, because I'm not going to be making rugs. I don't have that type of talent, nor do I have that interest. But I think most of all, I don't have the patience. I like to get things done quickly. And so that's why having the iPad Pro, maybe, is kind of on the fence. My friend said, look, he's a very big technology guy. He said, generally you can do basically just about anything on it. And if you're going one device, that's going to be a really good one to have. So when I went back there today, they had the one that I wanted. And so I pulled the trigger, because I was ready to do it at that point. But I needed to have a couple of days to really go back and forth on it. And so sometimes people will need a little bit of time in order to make the decision. So they don't want to feel pushed into it. They want to be pulled into it. And so that's where, in the sales situation, it's important to get the buy-in at every step of the way. And so that's where when you do that, you're forming the foundation, the framework of the interaction, and seeding the thought of the person having what they want or what you're selling, and moving them forward through the process. At the same time, you're covering any questions either before they ask them or while the process is still going, so they're invested in it. And I became invested in buying it because I heard so many good things about it, and the possibilities are. And it's not like I don't have an iPad Pro, but mine is 9.7 inches. And I tried to use it for working over the weekend. And 9.7 inches is fine if you're reading a book. It's not so good if you're doing an Excel spreadsheet. So it's really much more difficult to fill out information and all that, no matter if you have a keyboard or not. It's just small. and everything is all compressed, and it's like trying to do it on your phone. It's not ideal, especially if I'm going to be doing it for a while. And so I ended up pulling the trigger today. I'll let you guys know how it goes if you're even interested in hearing. Or in Orlando, I might actually be on it in the Zoom. You never know. We'll see. So, do you see how the story can be adapted and how it can flow from other things as well? Where you can seed other types of things, other types of information, and it doesn't have to be contiguous, but it can be used in a lot of different ways by bringing those things in, and that's where the loops come in. But in order to keep track of the loops, that's where the intention comes in.
If not, you go in the wrong direction with the loops. Yeah? Or do you set up a chain of emotions you're looking for in the loops?
And the loops link back to where we go.
If not, it stays open, and then
well, it could stay open, but as long as you're covering a lot of different things, it'll be fine. Sometimes loops don't need to be closed as long as the direction is going in the right direction.
Can I ask a question, James?
Yeah, of course.
The other variable in all of these sales processes is, of course, the transfer of money. It's setting a price and a cost and a value to what we're doing. Do you have any advice or tips with regards to when the commodity is a bit of an unknown, in the sense of what the end game is going to be?
Can you be a little bit more specific, Matt? Because that's so general.
Yeah.
It's well, like $1 million. I don't know.
Well, I had a situation. I'll use an example. I had a situation where I got involved, and I thought I was pretty straightforward in what my hourly rate was, type of thing.
Sure.
A bit of a long term. I guess they didn't equate, but as we got into it, in terms of what was being done, the client and the group of employees, et cetera, we started to uncover things that and goals were being achieved, and the feedback for the service and what was accomplished with the relationship building, team building, et cetera, in this particular example, was all achieved. And the feedback was great, and When it came time for the bill, they paid it, but I didn't get any more work from them. And the indication later on when I followed up was that it was just too rich for their blood. And I'm like, well, it's too bad, right? And I guess I could have, I didn't want to go back and salvage it. But I'm just saying, in this process, is there sort of a way to bring in the value as you go, instead of having a sticker shock, down the end, or if they weren't clear in the beginning? Or is there any way to check in that we're not going to have sticker shock? Not if you get buyer's remorse. I mean, the product is great, but the only remorse would have been the price then. You know what I mean?
Well, the question is what your service was it tied to certain performance? So, okay, it's a little difficult to say, okay, team building and all that type of thing, right? Because how does that metric tie to increase in revenue?
That wasn't even the goal. I mean, it was very vague.
Okay, so that's right. So that goes towards the original, what's important to them, right? Getting to what they actually want to achieve, as opposed to what they say they want to achieve. And how do they know they're getting it? Again, going back to the criteria and values, right? So basically, you thought you had an understanding with them about what they wanted, right? But you didn't have, it sounds like you didn't have, how do they know they got it?
Right.
So they got it, right, based on what you discuss, right,
Hmm.
which is what they wanted, but you may not have gone deep enough into the how do they know they got it, what they asked for,
Hmm.
right? So you can kind of, it's like if somebody says, oh, well, I want, a house where, I want 3 bedrooms and I want 2 bathrooms and I want, this amount of space, right? And you give them all that, and then they come in at the end and say, yeah, you did a pretty good job. I would have wanted a pool. It's like that would have really made me happy. It's like, but you didn't get into that, right? If they said, well, a pool was, would be nice, right? It's
Hmm.
like, well, you have to find out how important that actually is. Is it a nice to have, or is it something they want to put in later where they have space to put in later? Or is that something that they really want, right? Because people, here's something that I've found over the years, that there's many people who are afraid to say what they want. They're afraid to say what they actually want because they are basically conditioned to be to guard themselves against disappointment.
Mm.
And a lot of times that happens from the time they are children. They where they ask for something. Little kids will ask for stuff. I mean, that's great. That's the great thing about little kids. Oh, what do you want for Christmas? They'll tell you. They'll give you this huge list. But when they don't get it after a while, they get worried about being disappointed. And so a lot of people, I think, still carry that through. They're afraid to ask for what they want because they're afraid they'll be disappointed. And then you get some people who, they'll ask for the moon no matter what. And so that's why I think it's very important then to really figure that out, to dig and find out what do you want? How do you know you're going to get it?
Yeah.
Right? Because some people only have one idea in their mind about how something should be done.
Yeah.
Or, about, oh yeah, you gave that to me, but that's not how I thought I was going to have it, so I'm not happy. And those people are generally not as successful overall because they miss a lot of opportunities that come their way, as opposed to, and you'll love this, Barrett, because we're getting back to intention. Is your intention to get to the goal, or is your intention to get to that goal this particular way?
Mm.
Right? And so if you have blinders on and that this is the only particular way to get it, then you're setting yourself up for disappointment. Whereas you're missing all the other ways that can happen, right, in order to get it. And when you contract that out properly with that person, they don't have any reason to be unsatisfied then. And that's where, you have, you could get a team to a certain way by beating them up, or you could get them to a way where they all had a good time, they all had fun, they all learned something, and they all learned to work together.
Hmm.
Right? Which is the whole purpose of team building. And and then ultimately, what do you want to accomplish out of the team building? Are they fighting, or do you want them to work together better? And how do we measure that? Right? Because and that's where you, as the consultant in this case, I think have to kind of help them come to an agreement on what those parameters are.
Yeah.
And that'll get you more work in the future.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Thanks.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does a lot. Thank you.
Yeah, because I think, again, you got them to a certain place and you fulfilled what they said they wanted, but what they say they want is not always what they want.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because it's not necessarily, you didn't tie it to what they were trying to accomplish.
And how and what it's going to look like and smell like when we're there. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And you can, that's not only well within your right to ask. I think it's really important for you to ask, because that's how you also guard yourself from saying you didn't do it properly when you actually did.
And it is part of the well-formedness of the goals.
Yeah. How do they know they got it? You know, how do you test for that?
Yeah.
And if you leave it very nebulous, somebody else can come in and say, well, you didn't do this.
That was my mistake on that one. It was too nebulous up front. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's a contracting type of thing. And, again, you already have no. So it's all uphill from there.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Thanks, man.
Yeah, you're welcome. Bernd, any other questions?
Maybe on the loop side, no?
Yeah.
This is so this is something you can set up on purpose, no? And you go 5 loops and in the beginning and elicit some feelings, no? To train it. I guess that's the easiest one, like trust and
well,
doing something together.
What I've found is that approach is more difficult than actually being a little bit more organic in setting up the loops, because I would take your cues from what the person wants to know, what's important for them, like take it off of the criteria, and then attach the loops to your experiences. So it's easy to tell the story. That's why, if you have some prepared ones, that's good. Or if obviously you have a whole lifetime of experience. Or you can use parts of an experience and parts of other experiences, or parts of experiences and make up stuff. Again, it doesn't have to be, you're not reporting the news. You're giving a person an experience.
Like safe transaction, trust, some profit, and some things that fit into the sales process, no?
Well, can I ask you, if you don't mind telling me, what are you selling?
Big ticket financing solutions.
Big ticket
so it's
financing.
It's a long sales process, no?
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So, you can talk about, there was one time that I didn't know anything about this stuff. And as time went on, I saw that there was an opportunity to learn about it, and I became an investor in it, and that's how I first started learning. And because I was able to do that, I was able to really look at, the upsides and the downsides of these types of long-term, financing solutions. And I got into it more and more. So I got to the point where I really started to understand when it's right for you and when it's not right for you. So that's one of the reasons why I wanted to ask you about what's important for you in these types of areas. Because I had one person who, at first didn't think this was right for him. And, I had offered him this type of solution that would have been a real hedge against a lot of the financial problems we've had internationally. And, he's very conservative, and I understand why he didn't take it at the time. But when things started going bad, he came back to me and asked if he could get into it. And I said, unfortunately, you missed your opportunity back then. So, I do want to talk to you about what we can do for you now. Because, now the situation is different. We have to plan things differently. And when we did that, we were able to take him into something new. And he was able to not only gain back what he lost, but he's doing a lot that's even more right now. And it had nothing to do with somebody sending you an email saying that they have DHL ready to deliver $5 million to your account, which I happened to get an email today from somebody in Africa that said they have $5 million that's been approved by the International Monetary Fund to be delivered to me in cash. All I had to do was answer them back on the email. So it had nothing to do with that. Not that type of long-term, big ticket financial investment. And it's not Bitcoin, which is a little bit up and down right now because of different factors. And so that's one of the reasons why I'm bringing this to you as an opportunity to have a discussion about if this could be something that would be right for you. And if not, then you might know the right person. But at the same time, I'll understand what can be useful for you. And if what I'm doing is that, then that's great. And if not, then I can maybe direct you to somebody who can help you. So where shall we start? And so again, that goes towards really being open about my own experiences or somebody else's experience and being able to apply it to that other person. Because when you apply it to that other person, you can bring them forward together with you. It's this person that I dealt with is like you, and unfortunately he missed out on that opportunity, right? Which is what they're going away from. And then when he did that, he came back to me. I couldn't give him that, but I can help him do this. And that's what he's going towards. Right. And say now he's doing really well in this. And so in fact, I'm meeting him, in a couple of weeks in order to plan the next steps of where we take, which is future basically.
Yeah.
So all we're having right now is a conversation to see if what I'm doing actually works for you. Right? Which is, again, my intent is to sell that item, but I'm taking it in smaller steps through the process, right? To get investment at each level. My overall intent is to sell the product. My first intent is to have the conversation with a person to see if they're right for me and if I'm right for them, right? So we all know, you see a beautiful girl, you want to go out with her, maybe marry her, all that type of thing. The first step is to say hello, right? And a lot of guys don't get over that first intention of saying hello. And if you don't get over that first intention of doing that, then you never get to the end. So it's about taking the steps and getting the person invested in the steps and seeing if they're right. They could be that guy's not the right person for you too. It's like, oh, Bert, yeah, you're exactly the type of guy I want to know. I've got a lot of money to invest. It's all in small bills in cash. If I run this through your company, well, I mean, we can both do really, really well.
Yeah.
All you have to do is, I'll have you meet a guy and he's got it in suitcases, and all you have to do is bring it down from Mexico.
And meet James there to hand it over.
Right. So maybe not the right guy for you to be speaking to in that case. But it's important to know. Right.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. It is very helpful. Yeah, so I can structure it analog to this example. No?
It's always important. Most of it is information gathering and finding out what the person really wants, what the parameters are, what the person, what's really important versus what's the nice to have, what's the, and then how do they know they're getting what they want? Maybe they don't care, right? Maybe they say, well, you're an expert in this. My goal is to double the money in X amount of time, right? Whether it's in, in stocks and bonds and money markets, currency trading, crypto, it doesn't matter to me as long as I'm doubling the money, right? I want the fastest growth, right? And it's like, okay, well, what about risk? right? Are you very risk averse as well? Yes, I'm very risk averse as well. Well, then you have conflict there that you have to resolve, right? Because you can have fast growth, or you can with more risk, or you can have slower growth with less risk. But in any type of financing, situation, that's the trade-off, right? Because you could say invest it all in crypto, and then, today you might triple your money, and sneeze and it's gone. So it's really one of those things where it's important to understand where to go, where the other person wants to go, and can you help them? So any questions on that? Matt?
Um, when you, well, in nested loops in general, are you in the habit now of sort of uh, setting them up intuitively in the moment with the client, or are your nested loops quite premeditated?
No, they're very organic.
Yeah.
At this point. And again, it comes down to your comfort level in sharing, from your life, or pieces of your experience,
Sure. Yeah.
right? But if you're not comfortable at the beginning, then yeah, by all means,
Mm-hmm.
so, pick a couple of stories that you're comfortable telling.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And you can even work out the transitions between them as well.
Mm-hmm.
Bernd, any questions on that? You're on mute, by the way.
I'm on. Yeah. I fell out, or did it stop?
Yes, but that's okay. You're back.
Okay.
Yeah, and so basically, Matt asked, do I set up my stories, my nested loops, or are they much more organic? And for me, it's much more organic, because I want to apply them to what the other person is giving me, and I apply an experience to that. Now, it's important when you apply the experience. Some people get into a competition. Oh, you think that was bad? Yeah, this happened to me. That's not where we're going with this. It's more like, oh, I understand. I had this similar type of experience to you, and just to talk about that. Or oh, well, you had to make a decision on buying something, so that's why I brought that idea about the iPad Pro, up, and just because it happened today, and it's fresh in my mind. But it could have been about the car I bought. It could have been about the house I bought. It could have been about the training, deciding to go train with Richard. That's an interesting story. I mean, I was out in Southern California, and I had been using NLP for many years at that point, and I was out in Southern California, and there were a lot of guys out there who say they're master trainers of NLP, and they were terrible, just terrible. It was actually embarrassing how bad stuff was. And then they wouldn't say who they trained with. So it was really kind of a situation where I said, okay, well, they have a piece of paper, so I'm going to go get certified in order for me to be able to tell them to shut up. And basically, I said, well, who's the best? Obviously, oh, Richard Bandler's still alive, so I'll go to his trainings. And then I saw an old video of him. I forget which one, but he looked like he was in really bad shape, really bad shape. And I said, okay, well, I better go train with him while he's still here, because he, just looking at that video, he may not be here that much longer. And so I get to Orlando and all that, and Matt, you were there, and basically I met John and all that. They were setting up. I walk in, Richard, it looks great. He looks terrific. And it was, obviously I didn't know the situation back then. His wife had a long illness and had passed away, and he was remarried to Glenda, and she obviously whipped him back into shape because he's going to be around for a long time. But then I've been with him since then, and obviously the training itself has really increased my skills exponentially and increased my income exponentially, so that's a good thing. So that's been the ancillary benefit of all this stuff. And so it's really important, I think, to when you think about training with somebody, what do you want to get out of it? And that's one of the reasons why I asked at the beginning, what do you want to get out of today's session? Because I want to make it valuable to you and applicable to you. And it's okay to ask people, why are we meeting? How can I help you? Because if you can't, the best thing to do is not waste your time or their time and direct them to somebody who can. Now obviously if somebody's meeting with like Richard, he's in real estate, well, that's pretty clear. If you're meeting with Richard, you're either buying or selling a house. So yeah, but if if he's telling you that your house is not worth nearly what you think it is, you might want to listen to him, and see how you can, raise the value, or if your budget is not realistic for where you want to buy. That's why you have people who are experts, and all of us are experts in what we do too. And that's why we want to be able to, be that expert, and in order to say, this is how we can help you. And if they ask you for something that you can't help them with, the honest thing to do is just to tell them, and see if you know somebody who can help them, or especially if they're doing something that's illegal or immoral, maybe not the best person to do business with.
Mhm.
But I mean, that's up to you guys. But I don't want to see you on the news. But so I think one of the areas around it, again, it goes towards your intention. The overall intention obviously is to always conclude the transaction, close the deal. But there are all those steps in between that you're getting buy-in, and if you're not getting buy-in, then that's the area that you have to dig into a little bit more. Because if it's a sticking point, that sticking point will come up as buyer's remorse at the end if you don't cover it early. Right? Which happened to you, Matt, I think, where they didn't have buy-in in the process of what you were doing because it wasn't clearly defined and tied to what they actually wanted out of it.
Yeah.
And I think ultimately what they wanted was bottom line, to make more money out of that team, or to get more efficiency out of that team. And they didn't tell you that, so you didn't cover that. And so that's why I had a training in Israel where, that was the main part of the training, was, it was mostly sales training. Very different culture in Israel. I enjoyed it there. I had a blast over there. I thought it was really fun. And I highly recommend it because even if you're not religious or anything like that, the history of the area is just so imbued in the whole area. You can feel it. And it's really amazing because, there's so much history that has gone on there, and to just be there and see it in person and feel it is just amazing. Very interesting culturally, though. So, my friend and I walk in there, and we're going through. It's like, oh, we can't use the conference room because McKinsey's in the conference room, doing their thing. And so there you see a bunch of guys in suits and everything, and they're got PowerPoint going on. So it's like, we have to use this area, we set it up, and we have the projector ready. So just give us the deck, and so we can get started. And I said, oh, well, there's no deck. You go, what do you mean? There's no deck. There's no deck. You have to listen. You have to participate. And so they come in, and it really is about adapting to the room and what they want, and really being able to be true to your own way of doing things as well. So, we had it like, you similar to like what you would do in Orlando, right? Nobody would sit in the front, unlike Orlando. Everybody wants to go to the front in Orlando. Over in Israel, they didn't want to sit in the front. They sat third row back. And they said, we tried to get them to move to the front, and they wouldn't move to the front. So I just took out the first two rows and said, okay, well, now you're in the front. and so, so we had them really just get very hands-on in what we're doing, and, asking for the criteria and values, really being able to speak a little bit better, using embedded commands, embedded questions. And they, even just coming up with, imaginary products to sell to each other, just to practice the skill sets. And they started getting it. The guy went back to his desk and used the skill sets. He came in the next day and said, yeah, I closed the deal yesterday, using the skills. And that was a very good feeling for us, because people were actually getting momentum and doing it, and in a different country. And it just shows the skill sets work, when people put them to use. And so it's ultimately about what was tied to the bottom line on that. And the bottom line on that was he wanted his sales force to make more money at it. And so that's why we had to be very practical about what we're doing. And that's where we had to really be able to show them very quickly that the skills work. And there could be nothing better than somebody closing a deal right away with it. So, and that's where it's tying in and getting the buy-in early and taking them through the process and getting buy-in.
Yeah.
And some people, they were shocked because they didn't want to believe that it was that simple about asking that. We had one guy, he said, it's, I can't believe it's like we're all robots. And it's basically, you're just communicating at a different level than you were before. That's all it is.
I have a question.
Okay.
How much more time? I don't know. We have just a few more minutes here tonight, right?
Go as long as we're going to go.
Okay.
As long as you guys have questions. If you have no more questions, then we can wrap a little bit up.
Well, my question is about that structure, the format structure.
Yes.
That we were introduced to. Is that something that you like to have as a blueprint for your sales pitches?
Okay, so the whole point of the format is to it's more for teaching than for sales, right? So format is a good thing to have, because it makes you structured in the way you think. Okay, so NLP is about structured thinking, right? So once you get the discipline of thinking down, which is very much what meta model is, then you know where people are not thinking structurally. So I'm sure you've heard, it's like, oh, well, they're not telling us something, like with yours, simple deletions, but it doesn't mean that they're on there, or they're not on there. And so basically the format structure is really good if you're teaching somebody, or if you're giving a presentation, so, why are we here, right? Why are we talking? It gives you an entree into that. What is it we're doing? How are we going to do it? And what else can we use this for, right? And it could be nothing, right? If you go to design thinking, right, is something a one-off, or can it be used for other things as well, right? And it's all about a structured way of thinking about things. And you don't necessarily have to cover it exactly in that order. It's just about making sure you're covering those pieces, because those are the important pieces that people really essentially need to know about, whatever you're teaching them, right? So have you ever taught kids, little kids? It could be your kids or something, just teaching them about something. They'll say, why?
Yeah.
It's like, why, And so the point is, you have to give somebody a why. This is why this happens. Why do you why do you um, say thank you, right? So why do we say thank you? Well, it's the polite thing when somebody gives you something, and ultimately the answer about why we say thank you is because if you don't, after a while, people won't give you stuff.
Thanks for
Very
that.
simple, right? uh what is a thank you? A thank you is an acknowledgement that somebody did something for you, gave you something, and you're acknowledging that they did something nice for you,
Yeah.
right? So how does it work? It's like somebody gives you something, you say they say thank you. If you give them something, they should say thank you. If they don't say thank you, then it kind of tells you something about that person,
Mhm.
right? And what else can this be used for? Well, it's, if somebody's giving you of themselves, their time, their effort, or an object or something like that, you're acknowledging that person, did something for you, and something that was nice or considerate, even if it's not something that you necessarily wanted. It's, somebody thought enough of you to do something for you, and that should be acknowledged, because that's how we all end up living together better, in society. And that's how you will be known as a good person in any society, is by acknowledging somebody's generosity and being generous yourself. And so that is an example of format, right? And its uses. It's not necessarily useful in sales, because until you know the criteria and values, it's very hard to do format, right? But once you know the criteria and values, you can use format to make sure that you're keeping yourself um, structured in covering those bases that's very important, you know? So, why are we having this meeting with your product, right? It's like, well, this is why I think you should listen to this, to what I have to say about the big ticket finance items. But obviously, for a person in your position, that's something that's very important to make sure that you're covered, because uh, you know, it's not just about holding on to money, it's about making it grow, right? Then it's like, what is it? Well, you tell them what it is and and then you tell them how it works. And what else can this be used for? Well, this can be a hedge against inflation. This could be a hedge against a collapse or something, or a big stock market run, or something like that. While at the same time growing their equity and their value of their holdings, or however you want to put it. But that's where format would come into that situation, because it's more of a presentation as opposed to the sale. And then the sale part is really hitting those criteria and values and understanding how to talk to the person in greater detail. Does that make sense? Yeah, so format is useful to make sure you're covering those things, because if you leave it out, right? If you leave out the how does it work, a lot of people will say, well, yeah, it doesn't sound right.
Mm.
Right? Because if you're putting a lot of money into something, you really want to know how it works. Right? But I think there's people, they tend to get nervous and they leave out pieces. And so that's why really being pretty rigorous around the structure of what you're presenting, format is a pretty easy way to do it. It kind of makes sure you cover those areas, or at least cover them enough for the person to be interested in going into it in more detail. And you're seeing where they need more detail in that case. So format is a good thing to know. It's, again, it doesn't have to be in that particular order, but it does have to be covered. Yeah, those are the really key pieces to be covered.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Maybe I missed this one. The format, this is something we spoke in one of the earlier trainings. So
It's in trainer's training, Bernd.
okay, there I thought we are now in the YouTube box.
Well, it's basically why, what, how, and what next, or what else. So if we're doing it in terms, I know you were there when we were doing it, because we were doing it in terms of stations, when we were doing stations. And you may or not have noticed it, but we actually used that when we're teaching the stations, right? There's a separate one for format, a separate station for format, but we use the format structure when we're teaching the stations. Now, you may not have noticed it because I'm doing other things in there as well, but
no, of course.
But it is in there as part of the.
Bernd, if you want, I could send you image of it if you want. If you want me to.
Took an image.
Yeah, he took a picture of the flip sheet.
I took a picture
of the chart.
Yeah, I did.
I sent you a message.
It's 4 things. It's only 4 things.
Yeah.
It's not hard.
No.
It's just a pretty simple way to structure to make sure you're covering it, because in a pressure situation, it's very easy to leave stuff out. And so as you get more comfortable, with it, it just becomes natural to make sure you're covering those areas.
Yeah.
Richard, we haven't heard from you. Any questions? Maybe he's on the phone. Hopefully he's selling a house.
Thank you. I like what you said about, asking. I mean, I related it to my own thinking about asking for the order, because just today, I got a call from somebody who was joining an MLM, and I know 2 people in that business. And I said, really, I thought you were close to this particular person who's very good at marketing. And she said, yeah, the only problem is he doesn't ask for the order. So if I bring him someone like, the upline to close, he can't ask, he can't push people. But the other guy, if at least I bring him somebody, he'll ask him, let's join or whatever. And I go, you're right. I just hit me because the first one is so nice. He's so clever in marketing. I really like both of them. But the first one, he's so clever in marketing, but he can't close anything. He can't even close a door behind him.
Yeah, but you see, that's why he's in marketing. He's not in sales.
Oh.
That's the difference between marketing and sales. Marketing is getting the information out, getting people interested. Sales is selling.
Wow. I love that simple explanation.
Well, that's the difference between somebody who shows a house and somebody who sells a house.
Yeah. Because the people who show houses work for the ones who sell them.
And that's fun, or people who put together the brochures, who put together the videos. They're brilliant at what they do. They get people interested in it, but they don't know how to talk to a person to get them to pull the trigger. Which is what I guess you teach your team.
Absolutely.
Right. And then you have some people who have a hard time asking, for their signature on the contract.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's where it gets back to being able to speak in terms of the criteria and values, and what they're not getting, where they are, what they want to get, and where this can go. And after that, it becomes very easy, because you've already pulled them into it as opposed to pushing it. A lot of people who have problems with sales, and they say, "Oh, I don't want to be a salesman." It's like everybody's in sales. Is that you're either pulling somebody and offering them what they want and attracting them towards it, or you're pushing them into it. Now, what people think in terms of sales is people being pushed into buying something. But when you have what they want, you find that out, and you're able to fulfill that, it's not about pushing somebody into it. It's about pulling them into it
Mm.
and inviting them to really take advantage of the opportunity that they've said they want.
Right.
Right. And so that's where it pays to really understand what they want to get, what they're not getting, and how do they know that they're getting what they want. Because if you don't get that, then it's about pushing them into a sale.
And you're referring, when you mentioned that some people who like that, they had disappointment, in asking maybe when they were younger or something. Is that related to that?
Well, they're afraid to be turned down.
Mm.
They're afraid of rejection, because they're putting a lot of well, first of all, they're putting a lot of emotional attachment into the transaction.
Right.
Right. So they think it's personal if a person says no. And this is that person's more likely to say no if you don't have their criteria and values. You don't understand what they really want and what's important to them. Right. So
Right.
when you have what they want, if somebody has what you want and they're willing to sell it at the price that you want, is there much of a sale to it?
It's a natural thing.
Right. Because you know what you want. Right. So it's basically not a bad thing to to just say, okay, this is how much it is, and really be able to. I think this is where some of your guys may need help, is to set parameters around how much wiggle room there is, because everybody thinks it's about price. It's not always about price. It's about value. It's about what the person's going to get out of it. What
Mm.
do they do with it? What's important for them, for their family. That's why I used that example earlier. It's like, oh, this is perfect, and the kids are 2 years old, and they're toddling around, and they don't take up much space. It's like, yeah, but kids are going to grow, ideally. I'm you're but you hope they're planning for their children to grow. And when they
Right.
grow, especially as teenagers, they're going to take up a lot more room. So the question is, are they thinking forward, or are they thinking present? It's like, oh, this place is too big for us. I don't know whether it's like, well, is it going to be too big when your kids are 15? It's like, no, actually, I'm going to want that space where I can have my own privacy. Just
Yeah,
think
that's a good
about that for a
example.
minute. Yeah, and believe me, they're going to want that. I got asked by a friend of mine who was moving to this area, and she saw a house online made by a very famous architect. Yeah, and she really likes mid-century modern house. This is $1 million plus house, very large plot of land and all that stuff. She says, "Oh, would you do me a favor and go check out that house? Because I'm very interested in that house." I said, "Sure, I'll go out there if that's fine." So I go out there. It's in the middle of nowhere. I was like, okay, well, you know, I wouldn't live here, but that's okay. It's up to you. right? So I go out to this house and I go into the showing and I see it's one wall is all glass, which is fine because it's on a pretty secluded property. You know, there's a lot of property there. Um, and I'm walking through this thing and I'm thinking, it's like, okay, uh, she's younger than I am, so she's used to certain things. I understand mid-century modern because I grew up in mid-century modern, and you have small bedrooms, small bathrooms, small closets, and in this case, because it's a very architect's house, because the architect lived there, it's a lot of glass walls. And it's like, well, here's what I think about this. First of all, it's going to be a lot of repairs because it's old. You're going to have to replace a lot of things. Second of all, you have very small closets. She would probably want bigger closets, small bathrooms, small bedrooms. And at some point, either you or your son or both of you are going to want your privacy, and you're not going to get it. So while it's very attractive because it's really kind of that model home type of thing with mid-century modern, it's just not practical in those terms. Now again, I leave it up to her. I took a lot of pictures and I sent them to her, and ultimately she did not buy that property. She ended up buying a better property somewhere else with an indoor pool. So I think that's a big plus. So I think again it goes towards understanding, not just giving them, the kind of the features and benefits of something, but it's really seeing and applying how it fits into what they want and what to accomplish, and really kind of being that advisor and that expert that you are in what you do, right? And being able to show them how it can benefit their lives or what type of trade-offs they're going to have to make as time goes on. And like with yours, Bernd, I would imagine those are things you get locked into for a bit of time, right? So if you get locked into it, if you need liquidity, it may not be the best type of product for you, or you can't go in as much of as big a position. If it's locked up, you have to keep a certain amount of liquidity. Those are things that you have to discuss with the client and know that it's the right thing for that person. Like with you, Richard, it's I'm sure you would love to sell that property that I saw, and at the same time, you probably wouldn't sell it, knowing that the person has teenage kids, right? Just from the fact that there's a privacy issue with it. You'd probably advise them to the house that they ended up getting, which is more expensive anyway. So it would have been a better commission, but ultimately a better house. And it's a beautiful house.
And we always do what's best for the customer. Well, I do anyway.
Well, it's always, I think you have to do it not just for the person's lifestyle at present, unless they're very mobile and they move fairly often. For work, some companies move people around a lot. But if they plan to settle there for a while, again, is this enough space as your children grow, or is this space for now and then you're planning to flip it and get another house? Right. And those are two very different types of situations. Right. So if you don't plan on having kids and stuff like that, probably then, the school system is not as important. I don't have kids, but I think the school system is important for my resale value. That's why I took that into consideration. Because I don't plan on staying in this area forever. So Maybe I'll move to Brazil. So any
Good,
questions?
good.
Any other questions? No other questions. I can't believe that.
No, I just would really say I enjoyed participating today. I missed the first ones. Visible on YouTube, but it's always better to participate on in real time. Yeah?
Yes.
And I think you prepare always for an event in Las Vegas. This is what I understood.
Well, there will be an event in Las Vegas at the HypnoThoughts Winter Conference in February. I was invited to speak there, and they said, well, pick an NLP type topic. So I said, okay, how about conversational hypnosis? It's like, okay, great, perfect. That's not the reason why I'm doing this. It just seems that it's useful for people. I'll be doing that one. That'll be fun. It's a good bunch of people out there, and they're doing their regular HypnoThoughts now, but I'm going down to the Orlando training, so not going to be available for that. But and Vegas in August is a little bit warm. It's a little bit warm. February is actually quite nice. It's also the off season, so things are cheaper. But it's at the Orleans Hotel, which is actually pretty nice. They had a really good buffet, but they closed it because of COVID. And I don't think it's open again yet. So I'm not terribly upset that I'm not there because I can't eat there. That was actually
Which is that? Which buffet? Because I love buffets.
at the Orleans.
The good ones.
Yeah,
What's it called?
It's called the Medley Buffet at the Orleans. It's their.
Oh, okay.
And so but it's kind of I kind of figured out the system. They have a good Asian restaurant there, so I basically would just make a reservation so I don't have to wait online. I'd call up before the lunch rush and just reserve a table. But it's okay. It was okay. And I'm looking forward to doing that. So it'll be fun. I've got the new book out. Obviously, I don't know if you guys all have it, but Influential Rapport. So that's quite good. Doing well with it. And it does talk about that. The ability to lower your boundaries is key to really creating rapport very quickly with people. And I think that's one of the areas where, we kind of teach it from the surface in the trainings. But as I've gone on, it really is about, again, I think if people are doing therapy stuff and things like that, they always want to keep like a barrier there. And it's kind of lowering that barrier that really takes you into that area of rapport as opposed to authority. And again, people will sometimes believe what you tell them. They'll always believe what they conclude. And when a friend tells them something, they're more likely to believe it. And that's where you're putting yourself in that position to create the connection with them and then bring them forward through the transactions and the processes. So, I think I found that to be very useful. That's why I wrote the book about it. I've got other stuff I have to somehow get on paper and put those things out. But it's been a busy time.
It's good though. That's a great thing to write about, Jay.
Yeah, so so that one is the one that just came out fairly recently. So if you haven't got it, it's available, and
Kind of speaks to authenticity too, doesn't it?
very much so, very much so. And again, that goes towards that comfort level you have with sharing yourself. And again, I think the more we do these types of interactions with people, the more you can share of yourself. And it can be strategic. It's not about, just going around telling everybody your business, but it's about telling about your experiences and how they relate to another person's experience, or where you want them to go, and or what the experience you want to give them is.
I'd like to read that. Is it out now on
Yeah, it's
Amazon?
on Amazon.
Okay. What's it called?
Influential Rapport.
Okay. Thanks, man.
If you were coming to the trainings, Kathleen asked me to bring copies, but you're not. And I wouldn't ask you to bring it on a plane,
Only if you
strict
need,
on the weight allowances.
only if you need me as your assistant.
Yeah, well, they don't do that at HypnoThoughts. It's kind of, they set you up and you go.
Yeah.
So.
Bert, did you mention that you and I were at the same training once?
I guess so.
Very familiar.
Brent's been at a bunch of them.
Yeah, you are. I think so. Yeah, I was there last. I think in 2017, I believe was the last year I was there.
I go as often as I can.
Okay.
That's why we always look forward to seeing you.
And it doesn't matter if it is in England or well, I prefer actually Orlando. No? It's a more family atmosphere.
Yeah. England, they're not having them. I think they may do Brighton still, but London is no more.
Okay.
It's very expensive. London is expensive. It's an expensive town.
Is your book on Kindle or hard copy only?
No, Kindle as well.
Okay.
It's to satisfy that, that type of impulse buying.
Well, yeah. Also, to ship to the islands is a bit of a pain in the butt. So.
Yes. Now it's also, I've gone pretty much electronic unless something's not available, and it's mostly a matter of space. I mean, I've got thousands of books, and and it's at a certain point, they just take a lot of space. I'm at the point where I've been donating books to the library.
Yeah.
But that's kind of cut off now because of COVID. So. So I'm just storing them at the moment. And I love my books. I mean, I wouldn't have them otherwise, but they take up a lot of room and they're very heavy. Okay, then. Well, it's been a pleasure having all of you here, unless you have any other questions. You can always reach out. Let me know if you have any other topics you'd like to cover as well, or how we can incorporate that in. Did we answer, did we go over everything? Well, let me know how it goes. And Matt, make sure you dig down when you're contracting.
Yeah.
Now, it's just really important, because that's how they'll know they'll be satisfied, and you'll know what to cover.
Yeah.
If it's up in the air, there's always somebody else who will have a different interpretation.
Yeah, I'm not gonna make that mistake again. Sorry.
Richard, any other questions? He's going to take a little while because he doesn't realize he's on mute. Richard,
Thank you very much. It was really powerful.
Okay,
one question was about the towards and away, because I was nurtured on that belief about some people are more just kind of wired that way and more towards, and some are wired more away. Is that true?
No, it's just that everybody's used to expressing what they don't like. But
What do you mean?
Everybody knows what they don't want.
Right.
So it's easy to think that they're an away person. But for most kids, the first thing that they learn, the first word is no. Right? So we all know what we don't want. But everybody wants something. If you're going away from something, you're going towards something. The question is, are you going towards something different, or are you defaulting back to something that's similar to what you are not happy with, but at the same time are familiar with? Does that make sense? Because there's people who, they get into the same bad relationship with somebody else, and you'll see that there's characteristics of that person that they're just always going back to, and it's because they haven't filled that spot with what they actually want. And so it's about making sure that that person is able to articulate that in order for you to give them what they want, as opposed to just leaving it up to them defaulting back to what's familiar.
Mm.
But while they don't want something, they actually do want something else.
That's the key right there. They want something else.
Yes. But sometimes if they don't know how to say what they want, or aren't allowing themselves to want it, or admit that they want it, then they tend to default back into what's comfortable for them, even if it's not desirable. Does that make sense? And you'll see it over and over again with people who go on diets. Say, for example, they say diets don't work. It's like, well, it's because, it gets them to a certain point where they lose weight, and then they go back into a default mode about what they actually were doing before, which is eating cake all the time. Because cake tastes good, let's be honest. Otherwise, people wouldn't eat it. But if they instead are, want to have a healthy and fit lifestyle, they can have some cake every now and again, or, just not to the same extent, and get what they actually want. So it's not just about losing weight. It's about, living a certain way, living a certain lifestyle, and helping them articulate that and clarify that in what they're trying to accomplish.
Mm.
Right. So
Yeah.
when I was buying a house, I was very certain about certain things I don't want. No split level house. I hate split level houses. They make no sense to me. So I was very clear about that with my realtor, and so she was able to just weed out that. She did show me one. I said, it's a split level. I'm not interested. And that kind of saved us a lot of time. Yes, I was able to articulate my criteria and values to her, and especially about what I don't want. And I said, this is what I had previously in California. And so, am I open to something similar? Sure. But I want to see other types of things that fit the criteria. But again, it wasn't just all towards, or it wasn't all away. It was both. So does that make sense now?
It's beginning to, yeah.
Okay, well, if you have any other questions on it, we can cover that again.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions then? No? Okay, well, I will see you guys next time, I hope.
Yes, you
Very cool.
Okay, and then I'll still probably keep it up while I'm in Orlando as well, so you'll see the wonderful hotel rooms that we're all familiar with.
Going back to the same place, huh?
Well, that's where it is. Actually, the rate is quite good right now, so it's happy to get a good rate for it. That's helpful.
I suspect it's an open loop to bring us back all the time. Yeah.
No, I think that's where they have the connection for the space, and they're comfortable with it. But you know, what are you
No,
gonna
it's
do?
just a nice place. I mean,
It's changed in some ways. You know,
yeah.
at least we're familiar with it. So I will see you guys next time then.
See you next time.
Okay, excellent. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, man. Take
Bye
care.
bye.
Thank you very much.
Okay, bye.